Can you be done in 30 minutes? Okay. Finally, on the agenda, Senate Bill 99, Bond Referendum Transparency. Senator Johnson, you are recognized to explain your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Although I know a lot of y'all think I run a lot of really good bills, I appreciate that, but this is probably my finest work. But seriously, this is a very important issue to me, having served in local government and seen bond referendums thrown on ballots without a lot of input for the people that are actually going to be paying the bills and voting. I wanted to make sure make sure that the taxpayers and citizens of North Carolina know exactly what they're getting into when there is a bond referendum. Mr. Chair, we do have an amendment on this bill.
Senator Johnson, is your amendment before the members?
It is before the members.
You're recognized to explain your amendment.
Okay. So with the amendment before you, which is pretty much the majority of the bill, what we're doing is we're adding a ballot question, wording at the beginning of a ballot question that simply says additional property taxes may be levied on the property and that the amount sufficient to pay the principal and interest on these bonds if approved by this referendum. So we want to make sure that folks know that that you got to pay for these bonds as well. So it's not just a good idea, but just understand your taxes could go up. It also requires that the ballot gives voters estimates on the potential interest and property tax liability should the bond pass. You don't buy a car without finding out what the interest rate and what the payout's going to be in the payments. So we want to make sure people know what they're getting into. Requires the bond application be submitted to local government commission and includes disclosures that are in Section 3 of the bill, which includes the total amount of interest estimated as a result of proposed bond using the highest interest rate charged when looking at the immediately preceding years from the term equal to the maximum issue term of the proposed bond. Also, the unit's increase of property tax liability for each $100,000 of property tax value that's necessary to service the bond. And notice that the unit may issue without a vote additional general obligation debt in an amount up to 2/3 of the original amount of the proposed bond once the debt's retired. Section 5 is before a public hearing on the bond order. The finance officer must file a summary sheet that includes vital information that will educate the public and the media on the current financial state of the unit of local government, including any outstanding bonds held by the unit of local government, amount of debt that may be issued, the estimated cumulative interest, potential property tax liability increase. In addition, the bill also requires that the order approving the bond application, summary sheet, statement of disclosure, bond order be posted online on the websites of the LGC, the unit of local government, and the appropriate county board or board of elections for the local government. Lastly, once the bond vote is cast, much of the information about the bond referendum and ballot question is either hard to find or no longer exists. So Section 6A requires local government commission to maintain an online database that will compile all summary sheets, ballot questions, and certified statement of results. And then it requires that the potential tax rate be included in the ballot question for fire districts as well. Appreciate your support of the amendment and the bill.
Thank you, Senator Johnson, for that brief explanation. Members, any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Ted Alexander to adopt the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it, and Senate Bill 99 is before you as amended. Senator Johnson, you have any additional explanation on the bill?
No, sir. Appreciate your support.
Members, any questions or comments on Senate Bill 99? Senator Woodard, you're recognized.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Johnson, I appreciate the intent here, but it seems to me that we're putting some obstacles, and I served in local government as well, one of North Carolina's 4 AAA bond-rated cities by all 3 agencies. But as I read this bill, trying to understand the intent, it seems to me we're putting some obstacles in the way of local governments to issue GO debt. And of course, as you would know, that's the lowest interest rate you can get is by issuing GO debt. Can you help me work through some of those obstacles that I believe this is going to put for these local governments using GO?
Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Woodard, thank you for the question. Ultimately, I think anytime we can inform the taxpayers of what they're actually going to be asked to pay for, that should be the ultimate goal. I wouldn't call it necessarily hurdles or obstructions in front of local government. We're just asking local governments to be upfront, and the majority of them are, but we're just asking be upfront with the taxpayers. Tell them what you're wanting to borrow money on. Tell them how much it's going to cost them, and ultimately make sure that they're fully educated as to what they're voting on. Too many times with a bond referendum, they're very generic, and folks are saying, well, yeah, I love parks. I mean, who doesn't love a park? But am I willing to pay more taxes for it? Maybe not. We just want to make sure that folks are educated and understand what they're paying for. That's kind of the goal, what we're trying to do.
Senator Woodard, you're recognized.
There are times, too, as you would know, I've been a county commissioner, that local governments must take on debt. And when you phrase it like that, that sounds like a great talking point. But sometimes you have to issue that debt for things that are less sexy than a park. Be that water or a new police station or a fire station. I could go on, and you could think of those as well. And putting the questions like that sometimes when it's a necessary function of local government oftentimes means that the local government's going to be forced to go to some other debt financing to provide that essential infrastructure or public safety service or whatever the necessity might be for local government. I guess that's the concern I'm having, is somebody might say, well, yeah, I don't want to pay taxes for a fire station. When it may be that the response time in that part of town has been, or that part of the county has been degraded because you don't have a fire station. So I guess that's going to be forcing local governments to some extent to go to higher interest debt in some cases. So I guess that's the concern I'm having with this.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized to respond.
Again, thank you, Senator Woodard. I understand the concern. I think ultimately at the end of the day, with essential services, the burden would be on the town to make their case to the public and possibly provide more education to make their case as to why that debt needs to be or that bond needs to be approved. But at the same time, I think ultimately the taxpayers need to know what they're getting and what they're paying for.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Members, any further questions or comments? Senator Ford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sometimes always the citizens need to know more, because if it's not borrowing money for essential services, as some people think that's the only thing you should borrow money for, or if the county has over and above what they need in the bank, you don't need to have a bond on the ballot, and therefore a larger, longer explanation is necessary, so the taxpayers will know if they're getting a bang for the buck or if it's something they actually want to support. So I love this bill, and I'm glad it's finally coming forward.
Thank you, Senator Ford. Senator Lazara, you're recognized.
And I just, probably to add to that, over the 15 years that I've served, most time municipalities, before they issue any public debt, it's always discussed and very transparent before it ever comes to fruition. So I don't think this will deter any of that, because it happened somewhat already. I think this will further clarify and add transparency. I don't see it as an obstacle to local government, because most folks will know and either approve or disapprove of what your potential debt obligation is going to be.
Thank you, Senator Lazara. Members, any further questions? Any comments? Any members of the public here to speak on this bill? Seeing none, we have a motion from Senator Lazara. Senator Lazara moves for a favorable to the bill as amended, rolled into a proposed committee substitute with a favorable report to the committee substitute and an unfavorable report to the original bill with referral to rules. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Bill carries.